That's right. It is Flyers game day. Flyers on the Florida two-step. This used to be an easy trip. That's not the case.
Oh, you remember those days?
Yeah, it's not anymore, Smitty.
My
Holy, these
goodness.
two teams.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when Tampa was not a problem, and the Florida Panthers had their players selling season tickets in the building, and yeah, they both certainly have turned it around now. And after a very, very gutsy, I think it might have been the win of the year the other night, to be honest with you, given the circumstances and what the Flyers were dealing with, where they are in the standings. It was a tremendous victory, and so now they've got to make that happen again here tonight in Tampa against a team that's really, I was a little surprised to realize that they're behind the Flyers in the standings, but they're coming off a pretty good thumping from Calgary the other night. They're going to celebrate with a Hall of Fame induction tonight, the 20th anniversary of their 2004 Stanley Cup. So there's going to be a lot of emotion here in the building, and the Flyers have to come out here and spoil things a bit.
Sometimes those ceremonies are not beneficial to the team.
A lot of time they are not beneficial, yeah.
It takes players out of their rhythm a little bit. And, look, we hope that's the case tonight, but this is a Tampa team that is every bit battling for playoff position as the Flyers are. Flyers are top 3 in their division, which certainly helps. And, by the way, the Devils lost earlier today to the Hurricanes at the Prudential Center in Jersey. That was a final score of 4-2. So that helps the Flyers. That helps their cause. But they can't worry about other teams. You can look, we can look, and we can monitor what's going on with the other teams, but they got to kind of do what they've done all year, is control what they can control and take care of their own business.
Yeah, the locker room, I can tell you, and certainly the coach's office, probably the locker room too, doesn't have any idea what's going on in other cities. They're not paying attention at all. They just want to go out there and take care of their own business, and that's really all they have to do in order to get themselves cemented for a playoff spot. They don't need to worry about other teams doing this, that, or the other. That's for people like you and me to worry about, I guess. And that's another reason that win over Florida was such a big win, was that everybody else in the hunt right now won that night, including the New York Islanders, as they were out in San Jose and had no problem with the Sharks. I mean, that's one of those games where you're looking at it. Flyers are playing the best team in the league. Everybody that's around them, that's chasing them, are playing teams that are worse than they are. And the Flyers managed to get those 2 points and just, keep pace with all those teams that also won. So, you pull that off a few times, and it really makes a huge difference in the grand scheme of things, just in terms of the overall race and really a morale type thing. Because I could kind of feel in Florida the other night, you could just kind of hear the Islanders grumbling from all the way across the country after the Flyers won that game, because the Flyers game was over before the Islanders even started, and they had to look at that particular situation as a great opportunity to close the gap, and they obviously weren't able to do that.
Yeah, and the Flyers, the Islanders are watching it going, Garnet Hathaway, kidding me, with 23 seconds left, right?
Yep.
By the way, the Penguins lost earlier today as well, 5-1. They are now 10 points back of the Flyers. They have 2 games in hand, but those games are likely not going to matter. They look like they're pretty much out of it at this point. Obviously made some pretty key trades looking towards the future. When you look at a guy like Jake Gensel, who's a pending unrestricted free agent, the Capitals right now are sitting 7 points back of the Flyers, but 3 games in hand. And the Islanders are 4 points back with 2 games in hand. So if those 2 games were wins, we're not going to give them to them. The Islanders will be right there. They've won 5 straight. But the Flyers look to control their own destiny tonight in Tampa against the Lightning. The rubber match between these two teams. Tampa came into Philly, won 6-3. Tampa came into Philly again, lost 6-2 to the Flyers. But tonight's the rubber match. And, Brian, there may be a man down tonight. We've got the deadline. Eric Johnson going to make his Flyers debut. And they may be without Igor Zamula, who is dealing with illness, so they may only have 5D.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a strange situation right now that even those of us down here around the team don't really understand in terms of how many defensemen the Flyers had available on this trip. Obviously Adam Ginning was down and played in Florida, played very well, but the Flyers did send him back after the game. At some point they sent him back. I couldn't tell you exactly when that transaction happened, but he does not appear to be here in Tampa. He didn't play in Lehigh Valley last night. He's not playing right now. The Phantoms are playing Wilkes-Barre Scranton. So we're not sure where he is, but he's not here. And I can tell you, watching lineup rushes as we speak, the Flyers are rushing 5 defensemen. So that would lead me to believe that they're going to play a 13-5 setup. Now, they always have the ability to toss Nick Delorier back there. He was a defenseman when he came into the league, eventually moved up to wing, but he's taking line rushes with the forwards like he normally would. So we're going to have to wait and see once the official lineup cards come out who the extra forward is. Dennis Gurianov is here. He is taking warm-ups. Bobby Brink is obviously here, but was not taking rushes with the forwards this morning. So it's possible that Gurianov slots in as that extra forward. And again, whether or not he plays a lot at forward, or if they put Delorier in as a defenseman and he plays a little bit more, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting game here this evening in that regard. But the one thing that's not really clear is how the Flyers got to this point. So we're just going to have to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, not ideal. You're dealing with some injuries on that blue line when you look at guys like Ristolainen and Drysdale being out. Nick Seeler still out week to week as well. And you get the supplement with Eric Johnson, but unfortunately with Zamula sick. And I mean, if there was one forward I could put back and play D, I know Delorier did, but I would think Noah Cates could play some D.
Certainly could.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the detail of his game, how good he is with the stick and the body positioning. I mean, you're probably just going to go with 5D. It's not catastrophic.
Yeah, that's probably what they'll do for the most part. We did just now get official word that Gurianov will slot in tonight. So it is going to be a 13-5 setup with Samula out. So we'll see how John Tortorella uses everybody tonight. He's going to have, obviously, his 2 newest acquisitions at his disposal. No surprise to us. He did say this morning that he didn't. He knows Eric Johnson because Eric Johnson's been around the league for 15 years, and Torts has had him on USA Hockey teams.
In your 20s, Smitty. He was 06.
Yeah, I mean, it's really close. So, he knows who Eric Johnson is. I don't know he knows a ton about Dennis Gurianov, but, we'll see how everybody gets used here tonight. It is kind of an interesting coincidence for Eric Johnson that he comes down here to join the Flyers because this is the building where the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup with him 2 years ago. He was meeting the media and his new teammates for the first time in a locker room that has a lot of memories for him here at Amalie Arena. So, that's a little bit of an interesting wrinkle in how he showed up. But, it's obvious that he's got, the experience and the ability to settle things down back there. He certainly is, got his best days behind him. He said as much today, but, it'll certainly help the Flyers at least stem the tide here over the next week until they can figure out if they're going to get Seeler back anytime soon, or I don't know where Drysdale is, stuff like that. So, it's a good assistance to have here for him to be here.
Yeah, and a guy that, like you mentioned, won the Cup, former number 1 overall pick in the 06 draft as well. And Gurianov, I think, is an interesting one, Brian. He was the 12th overall pick. I think it was the 2015 draft, I want to say. Had a 20-goal season in the shortened season, but has not recaptured that. Pandemic looks like it kind of interrupted his flow in the NHL, and John Tortorella and the Flyers have some opportunity for him to try and get that flow back and play fast.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be one of those quote-unquote reclamation projects, right? I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that he's got plenty of good years left. He's a 2017 draft pick, and all the guys from that draft are basically in their prime right now. So it's certainly not out of the question that he could come here and kind of revitalize his career. I think that's the hope that Nashville has for Wade Allison, because things just did not go well for him this year here in the Flyers organization. He got passed by a couple of young players on the depth chart, and from all reports, it seemed like he could use a change of scenery. So hopefully this ends up being a win-win for both organizations, and we'll see where Gurianov goes. He certainly has more NHL experience than Allison did, but he had been playing this year mostly in the American Hockey League. So, whether or not that happens remains to be seen. But the Flyers are certainly happy to have him here today, given the situation that they're in.
And it's one of those trades you look at and you go, this could, very little risk for either team, but there could be possible reward in a guy getting into a new situation. We wish the best to Wade Allison, and we look at Gurianov tonight in his Flyers debut. Let's take a timeout. It is Flyers game day. Flyers in Tampa to take on the Lightning. We're back after this on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. We're back live. It is Flyers game day. Brian Smith, Jason Martinez. Flyers Lightning tonight as this gauntlet of games is upon us. It began on Thursday with the Flyers taking on the top team in the NHL, the Florida Panthers. They got the 2-1 win. It's Tampa tonight. San Jose, a little bit of a lesser opponent, maybe is the polite way to put it, on Tuesday, but you got to be careful against those teams. And then, Bri, how about this schedule? Toronto, Boston, Toronto, Carolina, Boston, Florida, the Rangers. Oofa.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a run here where the Flyers are going to be happy that they started with a bit of a cushion in the playoff race, because if they were on the outside looking in and they're facing a schedule like that, you got to think that life was going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, the grand scheme of things isn't quite as bad as it looks just reading that out, because when you look at the teams that are behind the Flyers and chasing them during that stretch, they don't necessarily have it all that much better. The Islanders are on the West Coast right now. They've got a back-to-back coming up, Anaheim and the Kings. And then after a couple of games against teams outside the playoffs, they've got to play the Rangers, Carolina, Detroit, and Winnipeg all in a row. And then they're going to come down here to Florida and play these two teams. Washington's got it even worse. They have a schedule almost as bad as the Flyers is in terms of the opponents, but they are in their Western Canada trip. Winnipeg, Edmonton, Seattle, Vancouver, and Calgary after they host Chicago tonight. And then they're going to come home and play Toronto, Carolina, Winnipeg, Detroit, Toronto, and Boston. Toronto game's actually on the road, but those other games are all at home. So the teams that are around the Flyers in the playoff situation also have pretty stiff schedules coming up. The one that's the easiest is the Detroit Red Wings, who are in the second wild card position. They can't pass the Flyers, obviously, in the Metro, but where the Flyers get caught, they're now ahead of the wild card team, so they could be bouncing around in that area as well. But, for as tough as the schedule is coming up for Philadelphia, the other teams in the race really don't have it all that much easier.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the standings now and being on, around a team that's in the mix, you just can't help but go, oh my God, look at this first round at Boston and Toronto, Flyers, Carolina, Rangers would get the Tampa Bay Light or the Detroit Red Wings, like the matchups. You just go through it in your head because we know what the first round of the playoffs are: chaos and incredibly
Yeah.
dramatic hockey. It's fun to
Yep.
be a part of again.
There's no question. And, as the as the situation stands right now, the Flyers would be the 3 seed playing as the lower seed against Carolina. Obviously, Carolina revved way up at the deadline. They've added 2 key pieces to a team that was already playing pretty well, and you know how hard it is to play against Rod Brindamore's teams, and they're all still stinging from a out to the Florida Panthers last year that might have been the closest 4-game sweep in the history of the league. Just the way that the scoring went. So, it's going to be a tough gauntlet for the Flyers regardless of how the playoff situation turns out. They basically are going to play either, again, we're putting the cart way before the horse here, but let's just pretend. They're basically going to get Carolina, the Rangers, the Bruins. So none of it's going to be easy in that first round. So no matter how they get there or what they jump into, they're going to want to contribute to that chaos in that first round of the playoffs because it is the only way that they are going to survive to a potential second round.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be extremely great storylines and insanely just exciting again to have it back. I got this email, Brian, from a guy, from a listener, and he said that his name was Owen. And he said, hey, Jason, often my dad and I notice the Flyers fall asleep in the second period. It's super frustrating when they can't clear a puck, and it seems to happen only in the middle period. Is this a thing or an overreaction? So we've talked about the momentum swings that happen, TV timeouts, period breaks, and I went back and looked at it, and he's actually wrong.
Really?
The second period, I was really shocked. The second period is the period where they actually have the most goals this season. 65. They've also given up the most in the second period, but they are plus. They've scored 53 in the first, given up 52. They've scored 65 in the second, they've given up 64, and in the third, they've scored 64 and given up 62. They also have their highest shot totals in the second period. So sometimes it feels that way, and maybe it was because that particular game against Florida, but overall, they've been a good second period team.
They have over the course of the entire season, definitely. Yeah. And again, I don't think it's falling asleep. I think that there's something going on in the NHL right now where we are seeing momentum shifts when play stops. We used to just see it at intermissions. We're starting to see it at TV timeouts, too. We've seen definitive things in games this year where a team is rolling along and then there's a TV timeout and they come out of it, and all of a sudden the other team is the one stepping on the gas. And I think there's something to that guy's sentiment perhaps in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Obviously, we're looking at full season numbers and getting what you're getting there. But I think the last 3 or 4 weeks, it has been a thing for the Flyers. And again, not that they're falling asleep, but those momentum swings have been happening because if you recall in the last 3 to 4 weeks, the Flyers have been an extremely good first period team. For a while there, it was, they were scoring in the first 2 minutes every game. And then, you'd get to the intermission and the other team would come out with a surge. And, again, I don't think it's falling asleep. I think it's just something about the NHL today where these momentum shifts are happening because that's how close everybody is. The parity in this league is unlike anything it has been before if you look at the last 3 or 4 years or so. And, there's definitely something to that would be very interesting for somebody to take a dive in as to why the momentum does swing back and forth like that. But I think earlier this year, if you recall, there were times when the Flyers were having trouble starting, and then they would roar out with a strong second period. So I think it has gone both ways, and there's certainly something to be said about trying to figure out how to stop, take charge in the first period and stop it from swinging back in the second.
Yeah, not possible.
No.
It's a momentum sport. Yeah, you look at some game like the first, I think 5 weeks of the season, the Flyers led the league in first period scoring.
They did,
and we're going, what? Like this has not been a thing
because
here.
we're not used to that.
Yeah. And then some of their best period, like I look at their second period back on February 6th against Florida. They hung on for dear life in the first period, and then they played a great 40 minutes after that to beat Florida the first time. So it's pretty strange how it kind of goes back and forth like that throughout a season, and that'd be hockey. That's just the way it goes sometimes. But I think those numbers are pretty interesting when you look at it and the way it has ebbed and flowed from a momentum standpoint and how you capitalize on that momentum as well. Flyers in Tampa tonight. Again, looks like they're going to go 13-5. Yegor Zamula is out tonight with an illness. So the 5D, let me see if I can get this right, of the 14 they've played so far this year, Smitty, and I'll rattle those off in a second from memory because I'm got it stamped in there for some reason. But the 5 tonight, obviously York and Sanheim, Stahl and the newest acquisition, Eric Johnson, and then the other D will be Adard.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the 5 you're going with. You actually have, you still have 2 right shots in there.
Yes.
Johnson and Adard.
And that question was actually posed today of John Tortorella is why did they keep Adard and send down Ginning? It wasn't a critical question. It was just, why? And that was the reason given, was keeping the handedness of the defenseman even. So there was a little bit of strategy to that, but it still is a little bit unclear as to why Ginning isn't here at all, given the circumstances.
Well, it'll be 13-5 tonight. All hands on deck against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's take our final time out here on Flyers game day. Flyers will take on the Lightning after they have their celebration of their 04 Cup 20-year celebration. Brian Smith, Jason Martinez. We're back after this on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. We're back live as the Philadelphia Flyers get set to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Of course, they're celebrating that 20 years of that Cup ride, and the Flyers were a part of that run.
I'm already tired of this.
Final.
They haven't even done anything yet. I'm tired of it. They've been practicing the videos and stuff. It's like I don't need to be reminded of that whole thing, but here we are.
Yeah, that was an epic run. Crazy series. And, of course, Tampa won it over the Calgary Flames. And I believe that Vinny LeCavalier and Jerome McGinley fought in that final.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Two guys that aren't known for that, but two pretty big boys.
No, yeah, absolutely not. I seem to have a recollection of Vinny getting in a tussle when he was here briefly, and how surprising that was. So no, yeah, that didn't come down his pike all that often.
Yeah, that wasn't a route. That's not how he made his money, if you will. It'll be the Flyers and the Lightning tonight. It'll be Sam Ersson. Is it Vasilevsky tonight, Bry?
That's what the scoreboard said. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, look, if he's healthy, he's probably playing.
yeah, absolutely. And the Flyers were able to solve him once this year, so hopefully they have that in him again. But he is always going to be a difficult out anytime you see him.
There's no question about that. One of the strengths of the Flyers this season has been the penalty kill. But you don't want to tempt fate because the number one power play in the NHL is the opposition tonight, the Tampa Bay Lightning. 28.3% they are on the season. And we know the guys that can do the damage. Nikita Kucherov, who is now actually second in NHL scoring. Nathan MacKinnon has surpassed him. McKinnon's got 111 points. Kucherov, 38 goals, 68 assists, 106. Nothing to sniff at. Although I thought this number was pretty interesting. McKinnon, with those points at 111, is plus 25. The guy just below McDavid, or below Kucherov, is McDavid at 100 points, plus 26. Pasternak's 4 at plus 21. Nikita Kucherov is minus 2.
There you go. That is kind of interesting, and I think that's obviously there's a difference between where Tampa is and where those other teams are, and I think that might illustrate it a little bit that this team has had some troubles this year at 5-on-5, and it's interesting to look at the Flyers side of things because I do think that's the one thing that the Sean Walker trade is going to affect is how dangerous they are shorthanded in terms of that quote-unquote power kill because one of the reasons it had been so potent this year is because both units, the Flyers could roll out a four-man unit that had the threat to do so. Without him there now, you're going to have to see if there is another D that they can roll out to equal what he contributed to that because he was a huge part of that transition play on the penalty kill. So right now I think the Flyers probably, until they can get back home and get a practice day in on Monday, probably just focusing on trying to just stop the power plays when they come up.
Yeah.
And where it goes with the offense. But that is one part of losing Sean Walker that'll be a little difficult to replace.
Yeah, he is a guy that fit perfectly in that system, both 5-on-5 and on the PK. Really didn't see a lot of power play time, but just was able to get up the ice so well for this Flyers team, playing fast in transition. Brian, one of the other guys that, as we look at this Flyers team, and we mentioned this stretch of games that they have, is Sean Couturier. His minutes have been down a little bit lately. He did get a little bit more playing time in that last game because Scott Laughton was dealing with illness. But Sean Couturier is a guy that they're really going to have to rely on, not only for maybe more minutes, but really key minutes in games.
And it's going to be something that I think he's going to end up falling into a little bit more naturally, maybe because he's going to be one of the only players the Flyers have that have been through a run like this in the playoffs. Just this stretch from the deadline until the end of the playoffs is one the Flyers haven't really done as a playoff team since 2018. And even then they were fighting to get in. You're down, I think, to 4 people who are part of that particular run. The 2020 team obviously got to the playoffs, but it was bubble playoffs, and the season actually ended right around now.
Yeah.
Actually ended while they were waiting to play here in Tampa. And so, I think the Flyers are going to end up falling back on his experience just a little bit. We don't really know still why this is happening the way it is. I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the season and we find out he's dealing with something. He's definitely not going to say anything about it right now. But it was obvious the other night that when, push comes to shove, if they need to lean on him for a few more minutes, that they should be able to do it. They're just trying not to do it night in and night out right now.
Yeah, and he's a guy that can provide some of the things that don't end up on the score sheet. All said and done on the year, 60 games played, 11 goals, 24 assists, 35 points. You're listening to 97.5 The Fanatic, WPEN Burlington, Philadelphia, Beasley Media Group station. It is Flyers Game Day with Brian Smith and Jason Martinez. as the Flyers down in Tampa, second of a 2-game trip in Florida tonight to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Another guy I want to talk about is a guy that maybe didn't get off to a good offensive statistic start to the season. Was doing a lot of the little things right, but Scott Lawton has been a huge catalyst. The deadline is over. His name was out there quite a bit, Bri, and I know he's a guy that is beloved in that room. Was the only one to wear a letter since Sean Tortorella was here until they just named Sean Couturier the captain and Travis Konechny an alternate. But Lawton can now just not worry about any of that noise and just mission. Worry about the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be hard to sit here and say that it affected his play at all over the last
positively
couple of weeks, unless it did so positively. Yeah, and in that case, you just want him to think they're still going to trade him because he's played lights out up until really the other night when he was again battling that illness. But the things that were talked about the other day in terms of why he was kept and why the Flyers were asking a premium to move him are really kind of difficult to communicate to folks who aren't around the team every day. He is a very unique player when it comes to bringing people together. Some of the things that he does are things that I have not seen another player in this organization do since Danny Briere. There's a lot of folks around an organization like this. But even the folks that work with the team day in and day out, it's not like they're on the inside of the locker room or anything like that. The players are the players. The hockey side is the hockey side, and the business side is kind of the business side. But Scott Lawton is somebody that bridges that gap and checks in with everybody around the arena when he gets there. Talks to people when he leaves. He knows who you are, knows your background. And again, it's kind of interesting, kind of ironic, really, that the last person I can remember doing that before him was Danny Briere, who obviously is now the general manager of the team. So I think that speaks a lot to the culture of where this group is going and why it would have been a pretty huge blow for the Flyers to lose him, especially right now when they are in a playoff position. If the return had been overwhelming, yeah, you got to do it. But obviously it wasn't, and I think everybody is happy that that it didn't come along. That he's going to be here for this stretch run at the very least.
Yeah, it's such an important part of it. Kind of the temperature guy of the room, and Danny talked about that in his availability yesterday about the rebuild, and he wants to have asset allocation, but he's really big on building this in a positive and winning culture. Something you and I have talked about quite a bit. I talk about it a ton on the podcast. People say, oh, you need to tank, and you're just inviting the devil into the room, and you may never get him out if you do that.
Yeah. I saw something interesting that I wasn't aware of, and I saw it in the interview that John Tortorella did with Ashlyn Sullivan from NBC Philly in connection with our Hockey and Hound situation. And he was talking about a time when the Flyers skipped video for a day because they needed to use the video room to do a fantasy football draft. And it wasn't just some of the players. It was the entire team. And Tort said in that interview that usually you'll see some guys do that, maybe most, but it's rarely all. And that's the way it was with this group. And he called it a special group just because of things like that.
Yeah, that seems like a little thing, but it's
not.
It
does. It's not. Yep.
It's a bonded group when you see something like that. And you think about guys from all over the world getting involved in it, too. So very cool. All right, we've got the Flyers and the Tampa Bay Lightning as the Flyers look to grab another 2 points in the standings and the rubber match between these two teams, 1-1 on the season. Stay tuned. Tim Saunders, Todd Fedoruk, they're coming up with the countdown to face-off, followed by all the first period action between the Flyers and the Lightning. You've been listening to Flyers Game Day on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.
Thank you.